Kendo side.
Yes. So the 10
in his
principles, which are
book,
the beginning
Swami
book.
explores the characteristics of authentic leadership.
Yep, those 10 principles.
Okay. He reveals that true leaders share at least 10 common traits. Number 1, they love people and are sensitive to their emotions and needs. Number 2, they help people feel happy and secure. Number 3, they create lasting values at all times. Number 4, they are philosophers. They seek to convey ultimate abiding truth. Number 5, they lead from the inside out, knowing that character is power. Number 6, they are principle-centered. Number 7, they are powerful visionaries. Number 8, they keep everyone engaged according to their propensities. Number 9, they are experts at delegations and empowerment. And lastly, number 10, they are servant leaders who leave behind a culture of enduring excellence.
Thank you. I'm trying to still commit these to memory, so I'd like to review them as much as possible.
Oh, 100%.
So from my understanding, we finished we're reading principle 6, or we finished that last week. If we didn't, just let me know, but I thought we could start at number 7 if someone wanted to start reading. So that's at page, at least in the new book, it's in 110. But basically, for those that don't have the newest edition of the book, we're just in the section of it's basically part 2, servant leadership, past and present. And then within that, we're on the 7th principle of the 10. Did someone want to go ahead? Please.
I can read. A servant leader is a powerful visionary. Such a leader must have a powerful and piercing vision with which he can clearly see how to make the best use of his resources. A study of the classic writings on leadership, psychology, and spirituality, especially those from the ancient cultures, will help to develop such a vision. In Vedic culture, the topmost visionary is called a Sastra Kaksuka, one who visualizes all things with the aid of the authorized religious scriptures. A visionary leader seeks to empower others. They continue to search for truth while maintaining their principle-centered focus. Visionary leaders have a good balance between right brain and left brain thinking. The right brain is more feminine, nurturing, intuitive, and creative. The left brain is more masculine and physical, interested more in results. Visionary leaders often produce a host of solutions for social, economic, and other types of problems. If we want visionary leaders, we must, of course, learn to recognize them and support them. Visionary leaders have great qualities which they develop through their interest in values, intuition, and partnership with others. They can bring spiritual culture to our religious and political lives. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "I must first be the change I want to see in my world." A visionary leader knows he must lead by example, and that his leadership will have a powerful impact on both present and future generations. Visionary leaders honor the inner connection of all life. They recognize that there is a supreme order and that there are inherent and universal needs. Such vision promotes a spirit of trust, partnership, and shared vision. They are focused on whole systems and relationship to sustainable development. Such leaders have no problem sacrificing short-term goals for long-term benefits. They stimulate healing rather than attacking problems. They often realize what former UN Secretary General U Thant once said: "We will not have peace on the planet until we have a spiritual renaissance." Spirituality is not just a matter of religion, but is the deeper essence and connection between humanity and the Godhead. Spirituality is the source of the universal principles we have mentioned. Visionary leaders raise consciousness and inspire people to sacrifice for the greater good. They have a clear vision of the future and the need to transform old paradigms that are no longer relevant. They focus on opportunity rather than problems. They often see problems as chances to embrace a miracle, and they consistently pursue a win-win scheme. At this point, it should be obvious that the world is in dire need of more visionary leaders. Most major crises in leadership are due to a lack of visionary leadership.
Thank you. Did anyone have any thoughts or reflections? on this section?
Okay, I'll go. It's
Please.
it's one of my favorite ones. My thoughts on that, and just reflecting on my corporate life and working with people. So my corporate life, and also within my charity and many other facets of communities, is the difference between a leader who comes from the academic studies of how a leader should be, compared to a servant leader with visionary. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware, with the studies of leadership, there's more of a corporate essence, and they talk about visionaries, and there are many examples worldwide. But a servant leader with powerful visionary, with servant leader and visionary leader, there's this essence and spirit of infinite intelligence, which comes from within. So it's in, out, not out, in. So it's not creating stuff from outside. But again, it's, the word God was mentioned, because when we are spiritual and we are connected to God, there is this infinite intelligence that if you're still enough and you're quiet enough, the vision will show up. The creativity comes up, that the pictures, the answers of whatever you might ask for, it comes from that place. And then combined with being of service, like a servant leader, which again is connected to the infinite intelligence, the God. It's bringing in that human element, the humanity. It's about people, and there is just so much more depth to that than being a visionary leader. Did I make sense? Does it make sense? It makes sense to me. So yeah,
No.
it's one of my favorites. I so resonate with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ida. I was appreciating your point, because I was just seeing that B.T. Swami, he really wants to try to bring in this idea of God and spirituality into leadership. And I think having that as a principle that kind of looks, as he said, honors the interconnection of all life. I know we've been talking about in the last few sessions, relationships and how things are related. And I thought that point also brought in there, but that he looks at kind of the root of, as he said, the connection between humanity and the Godhead. So yeah, no, thanks for bringing that forward. One thing that was coming to me that I wanted to really kind of talk about is this section here where he talks about how they focus on opportunity rather than problems, and they often see to embrace a miracle, and they consistently pursue win-win scheme. And I just wanted to, I guess, just reflect and hear from others on just, this, sometimes being a visionary leader, I can say, is not always easy. It can be difficult. And for me, I just wanted to hear how people have, tried to maintain that strong visionary sense when things get difficult. Like for me, or just kind of this idea of focusing on the opportunity rather than problem and trying to embrace the miracle. So I just wanted to, I guess, hear from, thoughts on people's personal kind of experience that potentially we could all learn from. I know maybe it's a question that requires a couple of moments to think about, maybe even particularly what the, when they've been challenged. But yeah, I think to me, like being a visionary at all times will require us to have to kind of go through these instances.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, and I have a comment on that, because this has been, that was a struggle for a long time, feeling like I was a visionary amongst people that were more analytical, like very analytical, engineers and things like that. I was kind of in that environment. And what I found is that the key to all of this is communication, and being able to communicate your vision, being able to paint that picture. Because what I would find is that I would just come to these conclusions or these visions, and I would have through intuition, I would just know the way, right? But then I would be discounted because I couldn't, like, there's a methodical thought process that some people go through, right, to reach conclusions, right? That needs to be respected, but I didn't understand that, right? I just didn't understand that the leaps of intuition that I was making that are just part of my personality. I think part of the personality of probably I'm among my tribe here. I didn't understand that I needed to go back and re-engineer thought processes I didn't specifically have, so that I could explain it. Because I think sometimes you've got to bring people all the way over the bridge, right? You've got to be able to explain, step through things so that people can go along with you. And that once I learned how to do that, how to reverse engineer and communicate in that kind of stair-stepping way, that's when I really saw that I had breakthroughs in being able to influence.
Well, thank you. That's that idea of being able to communicate your vision to others, which takes a lot of consistency and it takes time, right? Yeah, no, thank you. Ida?
Really love that question. Great question. There's a couple of parts to this. I think first it starts with self, to have that end in mind. So the end in mind is seeing, and Stacey's gonna laugh, seeing that vision, so much so that you can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it, you believe that it is done. Like it is done with the grace of God, with infinite intelligence. That vision is like it's done. And Stacey, I like the way you referred to, you mentioned two things: reverse engineering, communication. So my experience has been understanding who I'm talking to and how I need to deliver that vision to them for them to feel that they are part of it. Because when a human being can be part of it, that there is ownership, and then there's excitement. I can see myself in it. I can see myself part of it. And so with my past projects, when my experience has been when the individual feels connected to it, there's a buy-in. And more so when they understand why as well, and then they understand the purpose of it. The third part for me has been having the strength of community, or I'll use the word community, of people who see my vision. And so there is that support network, because, you have challenges along the way, but when you have this foundation of community, they just keep elevating you. They believe in you. And we're all human beings. So we need this. Yeah, you got this. This is going to happen. When you have that moment of other challenges, people falling off or not believing or whatever it is, you've still got this community of people who are supporting and elevating you. Because all of us are intelligent people. All of us here are more than capable of doing. But when do we get stopped? When that little voice in our head gets in the way. Basically, when we get in our own way. So we need to get ourselves out of the way. The vision is there, stuff comes in and you're in your way. Your conscious mind takes you all over the place, right? It becomes a roller coaster. So this is why it's really important to have people around. And again, I'll call it community, whether it's mentors, coaches, people who will elevate and basically say to you, hey, get out of your own way, Ada. You got this. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ida. All of that, all of 3 points are great, especially the last one about a like-minded community and people to kind of encourage you and push you, for sure. Avantika? Before Avantika, I just want to welcome Ed to the call. Ed, we're just discussing, we read just portion principle number 7 about visionary leaders. Mm-hmm. And what we're discussing right now is just BT Swami, he talks about the visionary leader trying to focus on the opportunity rather than the problem, and seeing, the opportunity of embracing a miracle. And I was just wanting to hear from everyone to learn, like how people, stay visionary when things get tough, or, they face challenges. So that's what people are reflecting on.
Sure.
Avantika, please.
So this is such a beautiful question. Thanks for asking that, and also such a lovely section of the book. I'm going to share my personal awareness with a personal example of failure and success in this regard. I think a point of failure, because everyone knows that a leader needs to be visionary and have vision and all of that. But I think what this section of leadership, the conscious-led leadership is trying to tell us, as it is not my vision, not my personal vision, that's ego vision, right? I can be a really effective leader, have one vision for myself, and then rally, through force, through power, everyone to come on board my vision. I think the important thing to mention over here is Godhead and source connection and collective vision. The important aspect is to understand that we are on individual journeys connected with everyone else's journey, and there's a collective journey. The vision that the author is talking about here is the vision that talks about the collective journey. And all of us are at some point going to come aboard that vision. The leader is the person who sees it first. And here is the person, over here they've mentioned the the Shastra Kaksuka, the person who is able to understand read the signs and know what the future is going to, be based on the events that are unfolding right now. And in this example, they're talking about using scripture and things like that. But even if I want to give you an example of how civilization spread across continents. It all started, in a place in Mediterranean Africa. And then from there, kind of, migrated across the world. These were people who had no tools, who had no maps, who had no GPS. There was a civilization which learned how to navigate using the stars, the Polynesians and all that, and basically went and populated the whole of the Southeast Asia and the Pacific. The important thing to understand is that the vision that the author is talking about here is the vision that comes from the Godhead. You plug in and download on that. In my personal experience, when in 2016, I retired from the corporate world in order to build up an enterprise that's focused on happiness and well-being of people. It was because I already had the vision downloaded, which today in 2020 and beyond, everyone else knows that is more important, right? So it's not about that I was the only one. That was not my vision. It was a vision that you just as a leader get to maybe see a little bit earlier, because your vantage point is seeing more journeys, more data points, and a little bit more, a master of your own ego a little bit. So that was the point that I wanted. The other thing that I loved about this section was the gender fluidity. The integrated leader is someone that is in touch with their feminine side and their masculine side. So regardless of whether they are a man or a woman, but someone who is in touch with their intuitive, nurturing feminine side, and their action-oriented, they're powerful, they're mobilizing side as well. So that this section was so rich for me, and I didn't want these two aspects and nuances to be lost without discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Avantika. That last point very much is, again, speaking to the relate, like, again, are we going back to kind of the relationship between both sides and the importance for both being equal and just equally as important? Because that integration is really important, I feel, for leaders. And I think a lot of leaders will get to a certain point, but because they fail to kind of integrate and balance both sides or consider those both important, there'll be sections of, there'll be kind of a ceiling to kind of the capacity of leadership. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up and just sharing your own personal journey as well. Mohit and Rasa, please.
Yeah, just really quickly,
I think what you asked was like, what happens when we have problems? So this is obviously, there's so much here. And what I'm finding out as I'm listening to everybody's reactions is how much I do fall short on a daily basis, like consistently. There's so much to unpack here. I mean, Ed can probably spend, 3-4 sessions just on this section, right? And we still probably won't get through it, but there's so much here. But I just wanted to say is when as leaders, our full-time job is to solve problems, full stop. That's my realization. And so when I had that realization is that's all I'm going to do. Most 90% of the time. Yes, we set vision, missions, and we want to execute it. But on a day-to-day basis, I find myself solving problems throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year. And so actually Ed's meditation, I think it was last week or the week before, when he asked us to envision that we have succeeded, in 2023, and think about the challenges that you overcame and how you overcame them to be successful. So I think there's correlation there for what I'm trying to say, which is when things get tough, we have to remind ourselves, I have to remind myself that my full-time job is to just solve problems. So please don't, I have to remind myself not to, this is my job to solve problems and to embrace those problems. And I think that's what this line where it says, we have to see problems as opportunities, instead of problems or whatever. We have to focus on the opportunity. And that's all I wanted to say, that once I changed that mindset that, hey, problems are supposed to come to me. This is what I'm supposed to do. It helps me to hopefully attack it a little bit better. Thank you.
Yeah, Rasa, did you have anything to add? Okay. Mohit, the point you're bringing up, Ed and I often have talked about in the past that if we basically expect challenge, then we are not like a deer in the headlights and we don't get stopped in our tracks. It's like, okay, we know that this is supposed to come and we can work around it rather than just hitting the wall and not being able to get back up. So yeah, that point of just expecting the challenges to come, I think is a really important mindset in the journey, for sure. Paul, please.
I think the biggest challenge for me in this personal section is sort of the balance between what Mohit just said in terms of, as leaders, we do solve problems. But the one line that got me when I was reading it was, such leaders have no problem sacrificing short-term goals for long-term benefits. They stimulate healing rather than attacking problems. And I think that there's a fine line between attacking a problem and doing it this way. So, and that's a challenge that I've had over time, because I am a natural sort of, I see a problem, I fix a problem, but sometimes that's not really the right answer. That's one of the struggles that I have. Thought I'd just share that.
Yeah, thank you. I think being in the always like the fix it mode definitely isn't, I've also seen that it definitely brings some personal, a lot of times we are in the fixing mode because there's some personal satisfaction that comes. But I found also that it may not have always been the best thing for all, all involved. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Christina? Oh, you're on mute, Christina.
Thank you. So I can fully resonate with every point was says. It's just like speaking out of it. I just trying to probably to remind myself, like probably everything in a life, that it's a process, not the end way. So now I'm a visionary. So it's just like it doesn't matter in what level you are in which corporation or private life you are. Keep on solving things or keep on moving. It's always where you are just challenged, where life kicks on, where some, I don't know, like unplanned, unseen things happen. And it's just a process and probably out of that, like out of all this discussion, just system which you supposed to incorporate in your whole life of a way of being, to keep on reminding you, hey, I actually love it. So it's like recently really like I was watching the ski competition downhill, and I just one statement just resonated me. It was just like a winning guy. It was totally bad conditions. It's an open air competition and everything. And he just said, oh, bad weather just fits me, you know, I like when it's nasty. That's where I can find my way. So, and it's so incorporated to me as a slogan for something, just to keep on reminding, oh, I like the problems. Actually, that's a part why I'm enjoying it, because it just challenges me. And that's where I feel challenged enough. But it's just a thing I have to remind myself. And when I, and it's all systems we all like in the, like this probably incorporation that you come around this, you keep on reminding yourself and keep on checking, reflecting, am I actually going that way, or like and it just, yeah, it's probably the way I could add to that. And yeah, would like to share.
Thank you. Is that the background noise where you are, Christina?
Oh, probably, yeah. I'm
Oh, don't worry
sorry.
about it. No problem.
Not
I just was
enough,
wondering.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy. It was really nice having you and seeing you again today. One thing that I just wanted to put out there that I often experience, and I just wanted to acknowledge it, was I think to be visionary leader, it's not stated directly, but there has to be a strong sense of embracing loneliness as a visionary leader, because there is a definitely I felt it many times, and I think being able to embrace that is really important. Just that feeling of feeling lonely. But I think for myself, having just, even if it's like one or maybe even two people in your life where you can completely show up and feel completely in the sense, like, you know, you can go with your whole heart and just feel naked. I think that for me has been a really important like aspect of just dealing with the loneliness that comes with the visionary aspect. And I just wanted to share that, because for me, like, visionary and loneliness, they kind of come hand in hand, because there'll always be there'll always be times where you know, because as Avantika was saying, you see into the future a little bit, but at the time others won't necessarily see it, and so we have to kind of embrace that. So I just wanted to put that out there as a personal reflection of mine. Ed, did you want to reflect anything?
Yes, but I think I saw Ada's hand up first.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
I think Ada.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. I just wanted to thank you, Ricken, for mentioning the loneliness part of it, because I really resonated with that. Just being on the journey of personal development, as you know, the deeper I've dived, and I'm still diving into it, I've had lots of moments like that, because you know, I'm moving at a certain pace, and then the people around me, you almost become like an alien to them, and they don't know how to relate to you. And so what I've learned is to be mindful of where I'm at, to be able to calibrate so that I can be with my loved ones, you know, and I can be in the conversation that they can actually understand, rather than them they're going, oh, I don't know what to do with you anymore. I don't know how to speak to you or be around you. And that's, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I don't know if this helps you, Ricken, but the greater my faith has been, like the stronger my faith has been over the years, and the clearer that I am with my purpose, I'm okay with it. When I feel it, I'm like, I'm actually okay with this, you know, and I just go and have a conversation with God. He's my biggest supporter. So I don't know if that helps you.
Yeah,
but thanks,
for sure.
thanks for sharing that. Totally resonate with that.
Yeah, God is your best friend, as the Bhagavad Gita says. and it's actually chapter 529. It's part of the understanding the peace formula, is that Krishna says that he is the receiver of all our sacrifices and of the beneficiary. He owns everything, and he is our best well-wisher and friend. So thank you for reminding. I always like to, what you said reminded me of that. Ed, please.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for such a wonderful conversation, all of you. I want to say welcome to Alicia. Good to see you on the call. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, thank you for everyone who's been enriching us with these discussions and insights. I wanted to take a cue from one of the parts of the session, of the book that we're reading. I know you're reading from pages 110 to 115. And what I will do is share my screen. Let's start here. So one of the points which are in that particular section, right at the end of that section, I think on page 115, is this idea of needs versus wants. And I wanted to look at that, but also to explore that through some scenarios as well. So the first thing is, this is a very interesting section, because what it tries to do is go a bit deeper into what people say that they're looking for and what the real issue is. Okay, so you'll see a map between some of the things that people want, which is on the left side. So sympathy, riches, fame, domination, etc. And against that list is the underlying need. And I wanted to pause for a moment, and I just wanted to ask you, from that list, did anything stand out to you when you read that section, which is right at page 115, or when you look at that list between what people want and what they need? Do you have any reflections, anything that stood out to you? Just curious. Yes, Ada.
What stood out for me was, so that there's the people's want and then the people's need, like how do I describe it? Okay, so one was external, so people wanting, it was external, and people needing is internal. So it's nothing, most of that, it's you can get it from within yourself.
Yeah, there's some. Yes, sorry, please. Please continue.
Yeah. Oh, okay, thanks, Ed. And so what people want, the behavior of a person can be so different from what people need, coming from the need of, so having empathy, fulfillment, appreciation, support, and opportunity, all of those. That's what has a person be the servant leader as well. Because if you have that within you and you appreciate and can access it, then you can be of service by giving that to people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for kicking us off on that. And I found that was really, really interesting. One of the things that Bhakti Tirtha Swami says in that section is that fulfilling people's wants doesn't actually make them happy, you see? But if people's needs are fulfilled, then they actually gain a real deep and lasting satisfaction. So when I looked at this section, one of the things it really showed me and reminded me was that in our modern society, and I love the way you put it, Ada, there's so much emphasis on the externals. So people may get some of these externals and still feel empty inside. Whereas if there's more focus on the deep root need, like a human need, as opposed to just an external want, then people become more grounded and they become more satisfied as well. Okay, so thank you for that. Avantika, I saw your hand up. Please, what did you want to share?
Hi, so great list. Actually, it really piggybacks beautifully on the last point that was made about loneliness and things like that. So my perspective is that in Sanskrit we have this thing called Swadhyay, a deep study of yourself. I think the closest thing to that is not introspection but self-awareness, because a lot of the things that we think we want or need they come from three aspects. One, those things that are conditioned in us. Maybe our family wanted that, maybe society wanted that, and we learn to believe that that's what we want. The perfect relationship, the white picket fence, the big trophy, on the shelf or whatever. That's what's been celebrated. That's what's been touted as the model of success. And so looking at that, we teach ourselves, or we learn that that's what we want. The second thing is that we are biological in certain degree, and we are human and divine in certain other degree. And the biological aspects of us come from a place of survival and scarcity. So all of the things on the left, they will be the ones that we will chase, because it makes sure that, might is right, and we kind of secure our place in the biological ecosystems. And in the spiritual journey, our understanding is that we are human. We don't even need to be divine. The human aspects of us have capacity and propensity for abundance, for fulfillment. So to, again, close down the loop with everything that was discussed, the point before this about feeling lonely, I actually, went through this whole journey when I bid adieu to a certain way of life, which was very rich on the left side, but not so rich on the right side. And in that process, we discussed with Mohit and Rasa and Christina in one of our earlier things, what I call the empty elevator syndrome, where your material world is breaking down, your spiritual world is enriching, and you're kind of in the middle, and you're like, where did all the people go? Where did all the things where did it all go? And then you are brought face to face with those opportunities again. And you start finding that you're turning down those invitations, because truly what then you want is your company. You want the company of what we call satsang, good people who are wise. You want a simpler life, you want to minimalize. So that journey, the bit from left to right, is truly, I think, what spirituality affords us.
Thank you so much. And that's really interesting. I really love this comment that you made about how some of these things are coming into us from external sources. Family wants us to have family. If we grew up in an environment where the family said that you are valuable if you have X, Y, and Z, then we can spend a lot of our life chasing so many external things in order to prove ourselves valuable in the eyes of those people that we are associating with. I saw in my own life, there was a period where some of the people who I was around, they were very external. And it was interesting because I could feel now, if I look back at it, there was an internal sense that something's not quite right here. Something's not quite right. And so we went through the motions, but then we realized more and more that they were so external that in order to get the things on the left side, they were able to attack people, criticize people, undermine people, play politics with people. And so I started to see that this was quite toxic. Now, let's be very clear. We're not saying that external things are necessarily wrong. It's how they're used. But when my sense of value is based upon externals, it's very, very dangerous. And I'm going to throw this out to you before we come to Rickin's point, because I know Rickin has his hand up. What happens when you have a leader or leaders who promote the external things as a source of the value of people? In other words, when we have leaders, and you can think about this very broadly, it doesn't have to be business, society, community. I'm gonna switch off the video so I can see you all clearly. When you have social and community leaders who directly or indirectly send the message that you are valuable when you have X or Y external things, I'm going to throw this out to you. What does it do to the community? What does it do to the society? And what type of behaviors does it start to promote? And I'd like to hear from people, and I'm sure many of you may have seen this. You may have seen leaders who promote things which are very external. And I want you to tune into that. When you've seen that, what starts to happen in those communities and those groupings as a result? How does it start to affect the behaviors, the interactions, I'd love to hear any thoughts. Please feel free to unmute and share. Then we'll come to Ricken after. Would anyone like
It
to
just
share?
starts falling apart. I mean, first it was copy paste of what is expected as a self-value. And I think that the people have tendencies, and I suppose for me it's also was very interesting discussion with all what's happening around the world and what we like when you have this sense of that you do not need that many people near you finding you around, but also like taking from another perspective, not to get ignorant. So that you take some people with you, or you also represent that the other understanding, which is very difficult when you feel totally in different surroundings where, let's say, official authority goes the other way. So it's just like from that perspective. But usually what it does, it just immediately like out of cooperation, the main system is competition, and also out of maybe the trying to flourish and incorporate also some deeper understanding on some brighter value for brighter, like and not very short-term goals. It just it all vanishes, and it goes pretty fast, and the more it will be like it starts from the head.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Avantika mentioned, I think you mentioned last week about culture and how it comes from the top. And so, they say the fish rots from the head, very interesting. And so I love the point you made, Christina. I saw that when the leaders were too external and superficial themselves, it started to instill behaviors in the entire community, which was a bit more, it was almost ruthless, to be honest with you. It was, I need to achieve something at all costs. So if I have to stab you in the back, steal your resources, lie about you, undermine what you're doing in order that I can get this prestige so that I will be seen as valuable, then I'm ready to do it. And then what you started to see is literally it's the community started to unravel. Instead of it being, because if there's a different type of leadership, a certain type of leadership promotes collaboration, cohesion, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's very special. It creates a kind of community where I see your success as mine. So now if I know something that's going to help you, I'm excited to help you because we're all in this together, right? Yeah, it was the famous saying, all for one and one for all. And that's very rare. Whereas the other side type becomes much more toxic. It's like, okay, if I know something and I tell you, you'll be successful and I won't get the prestige. So I'm going to deliberately make sure that I don't share what I know, I don't support, I don't assist, because that way you shouldn't come up. In other words, it becomes more a win-lose paradigm. I can only win if you lose. I can only be successful if I keep you down. And these toxic patterns, and I love the point I think Avantika you've made in the chat, it's a plethora of existing leadership models, and the resultant well-being crisis is what we have. Very, very powerful point. Because one of the things that Bhakti Tirtha Swami, B.T. Swami says in the Leadership 2 book is that the leader is meant to give protection, you see? But if the leader doesn't have the right mindset, he or she literally creates an environment where there's exploitation. And not just from the leader down, but it encourages an environment where I'm going to try and steal from you or exploit you in order for myself to seem superior. Very, very important. Ricken, you wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I guess the first comment was just in regards to this question. And, when the question was just making me think that it's very much, when it's based on kind of externals and metrics, then it becomes very short term.
Yes.
And, we've always discussed the motive passion is that, right? It feels good in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then, can phase out.
Mhm.
And I think then it places value on people that ultimately people will be, again, rewarded in the short term. But when we're not looking at people's needs rather than their wants, I think ultimately everything will fizzle out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So then how do we make it, how do we get in, how do we go in the right direction? Because I want to be very realistic. I think it's very important. We should be very grounded in the realities of the world. There are many people who have this paradigm of wants as opposed to needs. How do you help? Because we can't just say good versus evil. I'm very careful in my own life at this time to whenever I see something in someone else that I think is not good, I always try to see how the same behavior or quality is existing within me. Maybe next week, one of the things I wanted to do with us as a group is to look at our shadow side, right? I know Ricken and I, we've been discussing, there was a situation that with some leaders that Ricken and I know who got into some difficulty at a certain point in their spiritual journey. And I was thinking that it can often be to do with the shadow. It can be to do with the sides or the elements of ourselves that we disown, right? So someone is disowning that they've got some, let's say lust, right? They suppress it. And then it starts to come out in all kinds of very strange and destructive ways. Whereas if they were to recognize that and integrate that, it has a very healthy expression. Someone else may recognize that they have some anger. Again, if they recognize that and they integrate that, anger, when it's integrated, because anger has a value, anger as an emotion, the healthy expression of anger is to enforce healthy boundaries. You see, just like if someone is attacking your child, you get angry and it's a defense mechanism. Leave my child alone. It's a protective mechanism when it's healthy. When it's unhealthy, it has another expression. Anyway, there's a whole range of different emotions. They have their healthy and unhealthy expression. They have their expression as a want, and they have their expression more as a need, which is to do with the deep underlying healthy role or function that they play. So what I wanted to do is really explore this through some case studies. So I'm going to put some case studies on the screen, okay? And what I'm going to ask you to do, well, actually what we'll do the first, there's two that we've put together. Let's do the first one together, and depending on time, we may get the second one done as a breakout, okay? So I'll share my screen now. And I'll also be curious when I share the case study, before we even talk about it, to see if any of you, oh, hold on, that's the wrong one. If any of you have ever been in such a situation before. Okay, can you see my screen now? Okay, so let's go to the first case study. Here we are. So have a moment to have a read of this. Okay, the case study is of the disrespectful employee. And it's talking about an employee who's being disrespectful towards their manager. Now, dare I ask, is there anyone on the call who's ever been on the receiving end of such an experience? Okay, I know definitely I have. So have a read through, and then I'd like to start to discuss what's your thought process with a situation like this. I'd also like to know about the underlying needs, okay? Because we talked about this just a moment ago, wants versus needs. I'd like you to tune into the underlying needs of the employee and also the underlying needs of the manager in a situation like this. And of course, feel free to talk about your own experience, where you've seen this, where you've been an authority, even if it wasn't an official manager position, you've been some type of authority and someone who's meant to be under your guidance or authority is behaving like this. How did it feel? What were your thoughts and feelings about this? What did you observe? How did you navigate this? Okay. So I'd love to hear from you. Initial thoughts. There's no right or wrong here. I genuinely want this case study to be a catalyst for discussion, because I'm sure that there are many different ways in which all of us would view the specific situation and many different approaches that we would take to it. And that's absolutely fine. So who would like to begin? You feel free to just unmute and share what stands out to you, all your initial thoughts, feelings, observations, any ideas on how you would tackle this situation.
Okay, I guess I'll go. Let's get the conversation started. When I look at needs and wants, what comes up, and it's almost like Jane and John are mirrors of each other as well.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Because there was this wanting to be heard, wanting to be heard and acknowledged. So it's the mirror. It's like this pull and push. So domination and power and prestige. So domination is the protection, that they're wanting to dominate. So there's a projection that's happening with both of them. That's why I said a mirror. When we look at power, it's let's look at prestige, right? Because we're talking about, one person's been in the company for so long. It's John's been the manager for 2 years, but Jane's been there for a while as well. So the recognition and acceptance. So, when one overspeaks, they want to be heard. They want to be listened. Therefore, they want to be recognized. And with recognition comes acceptance. And so there's a power, there's a pull there around power, which is support. Wanting to be listened to, wanting to be heard, wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be recognized, that recognition, and therefore want to be supported as well. Listen to me, like really listen to me. I want to be supported with this. And it was, I want the power. So I'm hearing lots of mirror, projection. They both want the same thing.
Thank you very much for kicking us off. And Ida, what you said is very, very insightful, very, very rich. You see, if we look at life through the spiritual perspective, there are no accidents. So sometimes the very types of individuals who enter into our life, even the ones who give us a difficult time, they are coming in our life to teach us something. There's some lesson we're meant to learn. So sometimes you can have someone who's too submissive, and they attract someone energetically who's domineering. You see? And the idea is that both of them are meant to learn to actually come to that middle space, which is, I've got a slide on this actually. I'll just show you this slide that I prepared earlier. Hold on 1 second. So here we are. So when we talk about, because in that section, page 110 to 115, it also talks about the modes of material nature. So the healthy balance is being assertive. One extreme is that we're too submissive, right? So too much allowing anyone and everyone to walk all over us. The other extreme is that we're too aggressive, too domineering, too pushy. Both of those states are states of imbalance. One state of imbalance is I deny my power, right? So the ignorance, too submissive. The other state of imbalance is where I'm actually encroaching on people's healthy boundaries. You see? And what we can notice about all of those three states is that, sorry, the two of three. So when it's in ignorance or when it's in passion, it's not sustainable. The relationship can't remain like that, because in ignorance, I'm giving too much of myself away. And that causes, I'll go to the next slide, that causes when people stay in that space of being overly submissive, too submissive, they feel repressed. And actually it's very interesting. Let me stop for a moment. How many of you heard about the Will Smith incident at the Oscars? Okay. And it was interesting. He was interviewed by Trevor Noah. And Trevor Noah knows Will Smith, they're friends, but he's also friends with Chris Rock, the person who was slapped by Will Smith. And so Trevor Noah was asking, like, what happened? And Will Smith, because his biography, my wife has read his autobiography. So when he was young, his father physically abused his mother, right? So he grew up in the household of domestic violence. And so he said that when that incident happened at the Oscars, he said that child with the repressed anger came up again, you know, and it got me thinking. And that's why, again, I like speaking to you, because we can go deeper with this. It's not a superficial leadership discussion. The things that we don't heal, the elements that we don't heal within ourselves are the elements that come out. And it's very interesting. They come out towards anyone who's under our influence. Now I use that terminology very specifically because if we're leaders, it comes out to the people who we're leading. If we're parents, it comes out to the children. I think some of you remember the exercise that we did quite a few sessions ago. So I asked you to think about your parents. I asked you to write down their good qualities. Then I asked you to write down their bad qualities, right? The things that are problematic. And then I asked you to make to tick which of those qualities, good and bad, do you have? And it was really to this point to help us to see we've grown up with a certain context. Isn't whatever the context is, but as we become adults, it is our responsibility to make sure that we take the past and integrate it in a healthy way in our character in the present. And if we don't, then to Ada's point, you get this kind of power struggle, you get this mirroring effect. We literally can energetically attract certain circumstances based upon the parts of us which have not become properly healed and balanced. Right? And I know this in my own life, that in areas where I'm not properly balanced, the situation can come again and again and again. And that's a sign. That's a sign that it's not so much about the person. It's not about the person who's giving us so-called a hard time. It's something energetic about us, which is why, we deal with one person, we don't like the behavior, we go somewhere else. And then we find another individual, completely different individual, who's behaving the same way. One of the exercises I wanted us to do, and we'll come back to that, we'll hear a few more comments on the case study, but I wanted us to also look at what do I want, and then map that to the underlying need. Okay, maybe we'll do that later on, but I'll bring the case study back up because I want to hear some other comments or thoughts. So let me just share my screen again, and I'll just move forward to the case study. Okay, so thank you, Ada, for that. Anyone else? What stood out to you in regards to this case study? Feel free to just unmute and share.
All right. So the first tool that's available, if I was John's manager, all right, I would make sure that there is a counseling and coaching support provided to both John and Jane. The first thing is situational leadership. So Jane clearly is in the quadrant where she's high on capability and competence and a little low on motivation. So a participative leadership style is something that I would coach John on to start off with. The second, so that's from the situational leadership perspective. The second thing is that I would make sure that there is trust building exercises done between Jane and John, because both of them seem to be low on trust. I loved Ida's thing on the mirroring aspect of it. Clearly, each one of them is projecting their shadow sides onto the other person, which have nothing to do with the actual person, but with their unhealed, unresolved aspects, shadows. So with John, would make sure that he is coached on having more security in his, no imposter syndrome. He's early in his management career. So a little bit of making sure that he's very secure in terms of his own, because his need is also acceptance and validation at this point. So learning for him to get back to himself, so he doesn't need that externally. I'm
going to pause you, Avanta, because I think that's such a powerful point. I want to dig into that because I think that's very, very interesting. Because you talked about learning to get back to himself so he doesn't need external validation. How does one do that? What are some ways in which we as individuals can keep that strong connection to self so that we can do things with integrity, independently of how people may or may not respond?
There's some very powerful exercises where one can, accept oneself first. So first and foremost, identify what are the areas where one is not accepting of oneself. Is it in, is it in the qualities? Is it in your physicalities? Do you feel you're not worthy? Whatever. So the underlying aspect of it hasn't come from here. It's come from somewhere else. identifying it, isolating it, and for example, it could be very much that John was undermined at home. John's authority was undermined at home. Maybe he had a mother that was very domineering and a father that was more submissive, or maybe it was the other way around. It could not necessarily have been achieved. Similarly with Jane, you've got to take a look at gender contextualization and sensitization here as well. A lot of women, when they're very good, they come up against, because of the percentages of men and women in the workforce, they come up against men bosses that have been very mansplaining. So it may not have been John who's done that, but maybe she's just she's just learned that unless she's very aggressive and stands up for herself all the time and is hyper vigilant, she's going to be, like tossed to the wolves. So there could be a lot of things which need to be isolated. And obviously we don't know Jane and John, so I can't tell you what exactly. But these are certain possibilities. In the counseling, in the mentoring, this is an opportunity to understand them better as their boss and for them to understand themselves better. So it's not something that only gets resolved in this particular situation, but the learnings of this basically, season them for the entire careers. So yeah, I think a lot more participative leadership from John's side, a lot more gender sensitization within the unit, and a lot more individual work on self-validation and self-acceptance. Also, the one thing that I think works in units where different people have different motivations is to make sure that they have a shared reason for winning. So that's something I would really kind of put a lot of focus on. And that's where the trust building and shared journey. So game theory is something that biological ecosystems follow. But in high-performing units, it's really about win-win situations. I would kind of look at what it is that could potentially be, something that both of them see as a win, and then, highlight that.
Thank you. There's a lot there. That's a lot of very interesting comments. I want to hear from a few others. I'll just make one comment to that. See, this could be something very revolutionary. This is the kind of thing that B.T. Swami did with his leadership and his areas of responsibility. He intertwined consistent self-development and self-awareness as part of the culture of his leadership. So you knew that if you were under his leadership, it doesn't matter whether there's an incident or not, you were expected to be continually evolving, continually reflecting on yourself, and to create the space, and I know Rikin touched upon this, where you could be open and honest with people. So that, because that was, and this is one of the things I'm going to ask you all in a moment after we hear from Mohit and Rasa, is that how do we set up cultures which minimize or mitigate against such situations arising in the first place? Okay, because we always talk about this idea, mode of goodness, preemptive, creating a situation where this is less likely to become an issue in the first place. I remember one time that B.T. Swami was giving a class, and he did something which for me was quite revolutionary at the time, because he was speaking very openly about his own mistakes. And it was only later on that I realized that when a leader is able to be open, honest, and vulnerable, which you will do so well, it creates a culture which sends the message that it's okay to admit that you've done something wrong. And I saw the opposite, that when leaders try to pretend that they never make a mistake, and there's a blame culture, then you get a culture where everyone's quite toxic. Everyone's very scared to admit that they've done anything wrong because there's a stigma attached to that. And it's the job of a good leader, a conscious leader, to show it's okay. Because if we had more of that culture, think about this, if we had more of that culture in our communities and in the world, you could resolve issues like this very, very easily, because people would first reflect on themselves and say, I think I was a bit too pushy, I'm sorry. Or actually, you know what, I think I wasn't quite clear on what I was saying or explaining the why. If both people took it on themselves, first of all, to see how did I contribute to this mistake? Or how did I contribute to this issue? Then you'd have incredible world-class business relationships, world-class teamship, world-class communities, world-class companies. Because again, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So there's a lot here. There's a lot more here than meets the eye in that case study. And thank you, Avantika, for bringing out so many of those points. Let's go to Mohit and Russell. What did you want to share, please?
Thank you, Ed. So this is so fascinating. Russ and I both have had personal experience numerous times with this same issue. And so I just want to unpack it a little bit. I just want to divert a little bit from what Avantika said. And how do I want to say this? I've been in a position where John became the focus of how he should deal with this. And I think we have to be very careful with that, because what you can actually do is you can actually disenfranchise the wrong person here. And so I would disagree adamantly that we really try to find out who's the problem and where's the problem coming from. Because if we try to take an equal approach, you're going to disfranchise the person that actually, in this case, in a limited amount of information we're giving, I don't see where John is the problem at all, with maybe a lack of experience or something like that is coming out. And so my thing is, okay, so why is Jane acting up? So we have to get to the root of the problem, and we have to identify those columns on the left, the externals, right? And then address them with Jane to say, hey, Jane, it sounds like John is doing that. John's not clearly explaining himself, or that his vision is not conducive to the work that needs to be done. Help me understand, Jane. Where is that coming from? What can we do differently, right? And so truly get to that. And then once we realize what Jane's real problem with John is, which is he doesn't know what he's doing, right, is probably what she's going to say. And then you say, okay, great. How do we express that in the most positive, in a more constructive way? So maybe we create a situation where we take her technical expertise, and John and her have a relationship outside of a meeting, if you will, and then they confer what's the best way to present something. So that's the way I would go with that. That's just my take on that. It's happened to me a few times where I found it, if we tried to be a little too accommodating to both sides, it can disenfranchise the person who's actually probably a little bit more innocent.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate all of those different perspectives. And Russell, were you going to say something?
I was just going to add, because I've been in this situation quite a number of times. In my case, I just give some context. Being female, being a young manager, managing people with a lot more experience, I ran into this type of problem very frequently. And so, when I was looking at this problem, I was relating to it on a personal level. And what I found, I agree with a lot that's been said in terms of, Jane needs to be, appreciated. She needs to be recognized, accepted. There's so much there, right? She probably didn't have, opportunities. She probably didn't have support. She definitely didn't have good guidance. So she needs all of those things, but she's just not giving John the opportunity to do all of that for her. And so, underlying all of that is trust building and relationship building, as you were saying, Ed. But, here's the thing. I found that, you were saying earlier, Ed, you have to try to work with a person to shift their paradigm from a want to a need. Mm-hmm. And so that takes time, and you can only, help people make that shift if you build trust, but also invest in them, but also if that person wants to change. Oh. And if that person does not want to change, they're like, you know what, I'm all about me, and I'm going to climb on your shoulders wherever way I can find. And if you're not going to get me what I want, then I'm just going to go above you or around you. Then, there's nothing that can be done. That person, at the end of the day, if that person is toxic to the culture, like you were saying, it's all about the culture. If the leader is setting the right culture and this person is undermining that culture and you know, adding a toxic element, which is affecting the team, then to me that this would be like, Jane, you know, you're great. You have all this technical expertise, but you're not the right fit here.
Yeah. Can I just add something real quick to that also, Ed? That exactly situation arose, and the best solution was for that person to move out of that situation. And that goes back to what Paul had said earlier today, which is to make that distinction between short-term and long-term, what's right for you. So short-term, how the heck are you going to replace that technical skill set that this person has? Versus the long-term is the toxic, you know, the culture. What do you want to preserve? And so there's the hard decision where I chose to separate myself from the technical, and it cost, you know, it was challenging to replace those technical skills. And then the long term is my culture is a lot better, as you know, I'm a year and a half past that now. So there's definitely a challenge. So now the Addie goes back to you, how important was to really recruit the right people, right? Because there's going to be consequences when things go wrong. And so I just wanted to tell you that this is literally a lose-lose situation, but then you have to figure out long-term versus short-term. You know, as Paul was saying, you've got to have those decisions, you know, you got to weigh those things. So thank you.
Thank you. And very, very interesting conversation. And I love the fact that everyone's bringing both their experiences, like I hear that very, very clearly, and also their perspectives as well. And I think it's very, very rich. Thank you all for sharing. I'm going to go to Christina. You're muted, Christina.
Today is not my day with me. Yeah. So I would probably also, this situation is so known probably 100 times everywhere from all the sides. Of what I can say for a case study, we just have too little information at that point. It might be that there are issues with Jane, it might be that with John, it might be they both having, or they are both good, yeah, so it's just a little information to make a decision on that, but we do not have also information if it was already set the steps of intermediation or something like this, so we cannot transfer, but on the fact, I mean, probably to decide like on that fact, you see that they kind of cleared it out in between each other, so it can be just a character like that she speaks louder, or she's in argument like she likes to challenge like a discussion or something, and it might be the strong boss which is also okay with that, and who sees that it's the authority is challenged? Is it the boss himself, or it's somebody else thinks that it is? So it just like I'm trying to learn that it's not to project my own experience in the situation immediately, just first probably hearing what stands out, the only one that it starts affecting the team efficiency, and that's already a red flag, which you have to take steps how you solve, like interrupt, or how you solve that. And in case like it might be toxic like actions in one and another side, so you probably also to take the decisions that it's maybe time for kind of searching another pathways for one or another, in which case is that, and probably for me what is challenging, like when it's going on and then you recognize on whatever it is, like it is kind of you're having the team, and especially it's in for example, it can be also in NGOs, yeah, like you having the team who are kind of working on their free basis, yeah, and you are like relying on the skills and resources, and like but you recognize the really kind of the systematic approach, the toxic approach, like which is despite all steps taken, like I don't know, intermediation, like clearing the needs behind, making a team buildings, making the all strategy meetings, making and everything, and it's keep on going out, and usually it's all the time growing, and for example, when you are not in a position to kind of immediately like eliminate what part, how you keep on going, like to keeping the team, like I mean, as a lead, for example, on the side, you cannot say goodbye to one on another. It's not on your authority power, like official authority power, but and it's on whatever reason kept, but you have to somehow also keep the team. So that's also a very interesting point when all the goodwill and understanding and searching for all this, you know, does not work. What are the mechanisms coping with that? So that's very interesting point of that discussion for me.
Thank you. And I'll just say also the case study is deliberately ambiguous for this reason. It gives a good reason. It gives a good source of some really interesting perspectives, because one thing for us all to notice is when we see a case study where there's gaps, there's certain assumptions that we're all making, which are not explicitly written in that case study, but we're also looking at it, and this is natural from our own experience. So we'll fill in some gaps. So based on what I've read, oh, obviously this is the case, or that's the case, or he should have done this, or she should have done that. And it's very interesting because we've discussed this with many leaders. There's some leaders and they'll immediately blame John. He's a leader, he should be more firm, he should be more decisive. If this is happening, it's because he's not pulling his foot down, etc. There are some leaders who will immediately blame Jane. There are some leaders who will look at it differently. And I'll add one more thing before we come to Avantika. There's also a cultural lens. There's a cultural lens on this. So depending on our culture, which also has some impact upon our values, we may judge that particular situation from different perspectives. In some cultures, with more of an emphasis on self-reliance, they may blame the manager because it's your job. You should actually, it's because you don't stand up for yourself, you don't put the people in their place, and that's why this goes on. In other cultures, which are maybe more coming from the look, looking at this idea of protection, they may immediately have a different view. Anyway, you get the point. So it's just very, very interesting to notice, what do I assume? Where do I fill the gaps? What's not explicitly written here that I've just taken as that must be obviously the case? Because it's slightly different for different individuals. Thank you, Christina, for sharing that. And you are right. Sometimes we may not even be able to remove someone. And then there's a question of, what do I do? I've got to keep these same staff. In the UK and in some other countries, it's very difficult to remove someone from a role if they're not behaving properly. It's very difficult, not so easy. And I'm sure in the US as well. And sometimes, to be very honest, sometimes people play on the fact that they know it's hard to remove them. I was a manager once for one group in the workplace. And it was interesting, before I became the manager for that group, one of the members of the team who eventually left, he admitted something to me once. He told me, oh, thank you, Ida. I think you have to go. Okay, we'll close soon. Thank you, Ida. Take care.
Thanks, Ida.
He admitted to me that he watches people to see what they allow other people to get away with. And he uses that to determine how he behaves towards other people. And he was a terrible employee. I'll be honest with you, he was terrible. He was terrible. In fact, what happened was the head of the company was trying to get rid of him. You know, they made redundancies at one point. I was in the company at the time, and I took the redundancy because I wanted to move on. But they wanted me to stay on because then they could use the statistics to say that he's a low performer. So they could say, well, unfortunately, we're going to have to let you go. And they didn't, but it's a whole thing. So they're just trying to find ways to get rid of this person. So there's a lot there. Avantika, you wanted to make a comment, and then we'll close after Avantika's.
If you're short on time, I can totally skip it. I'll leave that to you.
Well, how much time do you feel you need?
I just need a minute.
A minute?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, please.
Okay, so no, I really liked everything. I just wanted to bring up a personal experience that I had when I was in my 20s and a wonderful leader that directed me in the right direction. Because of my circumstances, I was in my 20s. I had a little bit of confidence issues because I just recovered from a brain tumor surgery, and I was brown. Every other person in the boardroom was male in the 50s. And I was expected to lead something in my 20s because I just had the, the required, I guess, pedigree or whatever. So when I went in there, I had very low confidence. And some of the, for me, why I feel both John and Jane, because when I identify with John, is that when one is a young leader, we're not just transforming people for that situation and that responsibility and that role, but the interventions and the learning, transformations that good leaders make stay with them their whole year, their whole life, their whole careers. And what that leader did for me was, first and foremost, he gave me 2 pieces of advice that have stayed with me and allowed me to accept myself as a leader, right? To banish my self-doubt, and not be in that position again and again, because nothing happens randomly. If something has happened once, it has not happened to put you at a disservice. It has happened because there's something learning opportunity in there that you need to kind of, once you resolve that, it rarely happens again. And for me, because it was resolved at that time through 2 things. The first thing is I was leading a very successful unit that I gotten very attached to, and I wanted to stay leading with them. And this manager put this leader of mine, he was the president of the company I was working with. He put his bets on me, moved me out from there, and moved me into a struggling unit that needed good leadership. And I was shocked. I was like, why? Because I've built this unit with my hands, and I just giving a, and you've put, is a punishment? And he told me that if I was to do, if I was to take everything from you've taken something from A to B, now let someone else come and take it from B to C. And if you're trying to take something from A to Z, then you're going to retire from this unit. You need to kind of have more exposure. And so he put me into this struggling unit where I had literally, I was 25. The average age of the set of team that I was leading was 35. And they all had a lot more seasoning. And plus, I was not an engineer. I didn't have the technical expertise. They had all the technical expertise. I was just brought in because I had the business excellence expertise and also some really good client leadership. So we were on the verge of losing the account. And every single day I had sabotage coming at me. I had, 3 main leaders who saw me as an obstacle to their promotion and literally just wanted to out me. And I would go crying to my thing, what have you done with me? I was all sorted and doing so well. You put me in a new unit. And this is what this person said: what you will learn in this boardroom is something that you cannot learn in any, business school will not teach you. And he said that as president, you think I don't go through this? When I go through my, this thing, there is not another kid in this company that is getting the exposure that you are. And what you are going to have to learn is like, nobody comes and holds my hand and says that, no, the board of directors need to play nice and you need to fire them and all of that. I'm just expected to show up there and allow for those relationships. And he said, what starts off with? They can smell fear. They can smell imposter syndrome. They can smell a lack of confidence in yourself. You have to make sure that when you go out there and face anyone in your team, you have that much of self-acceptance, that much of confidence in yourself that you could have 15 people coming there and shooting you down, but you are able to stand there and, this thing. That stayed with me, years later, 25 years later, when I go out in the world and I have to meet with, and I'm leading millennials you cannot get more authority bashing than millennials, right? So when you are put into these situations, you go back at everything that you learned when you were in your 20s and 30s, and that makes sense. So I just want to bring that point out there. Hope that makes sense, that yes, focusing on John is important, not because he's not innocent, but because that incident is happening with him for a reason. And if that incident is used as a learning opportunity for him, he will grow leaps and bounds in his career. So whether you're with Jane or with John, give both of them learning interventions.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to synthesize those two, then we'll end. And that is, I think there's value in everything that's been said. So what I'm taking by bringing it all together is if we're going to give focus to someone who may seem externally to be innocent, it's also about framing it so that they know we're not focusing on you, we're not implying by this focus that you've done something wrong. But what we're going to do is we're going to recognize that this can be a great learning opportunity for you, because unfortunately, sometimes you'll have to deal with this type of situation. So we'd like to empower you, give you strength so that whenever this comes your way, you're able to deal with it. And at the same time, that does not in any way imply that Jane's behavior is not wrong. If that's the way that if that's the conclusion we come to when we've done the deep investigation as well. I really wanted to say thank you to all of you. And I love one thing I love about this group is that the maturity is such that we can respectfully look at things from different angles. You see, it doesn't, and this is what we're missing in the world right now. I think we've all noticed that, right? Anyone says something different, it immediately becomes like an attack and we've got to, shoot them down. But this is what we want. We want healthy debate because we want to learn. Actually, at the end of the day, and this is one of the points that B.T. Swami makes, the leader is seeking truth. He's a philosopher or she's a philosopher who is seeking the truth. What's actually the truth? What's the right thing to do? And I'm ready to hear from anyone and everyone and evaluate to see what's right. And that comes to the point that was made earlier. The more we're secure, the more we can take our ego off the table and just try to understand what's best. And I see that as something which is becoming increasingly rare in modern society. In modern society, there's so much insecurity that even if someone says something that's clearly wrong, if someone wants to talk about it, it becomes an issue. And that's what we have to get away from. So thank you for being like a healthy model of that type of honest and open conversation. And I want to invite more of that. Whatever we discuss, you may have a particular angle, let's talk about it and let's pull our cards on the table. This is what I think. This is why I think it. What do you think? Maybe I've missed something, So we can, again, that idea of humility so that we can all learn and grow. Thank you. It's been a very fantastic session, and I really appreciate everything that was shared by everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see everybody next week.
Okay. See you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.